Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Vydeo, spelled B-Y-D-E-O, was born from a side hustle that organically presented itself through Ariana Escalante's career as an on-camera spokesperson. As Ariana's clients started asking her if she could offer full production services beyond her on-camera work, she saw a need for a complete package video content agency. That's when she and her fiancé, Jon Gluck, got to talking. They decided to team up and bring something fresh and in demand to the video production space. 4 years later, Vydeo has blossomed into a successful and growing full production marketing video business with a stellar team and a collection of awesome clients from bigger brands like Boys and Girls Club and the Better Business Bureau to all sorts of inspiring small businesses. Thanks for joining me, y'all.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Great to see you. Thank you.
So this is super interesting to me. You guys started as one little small piece and then over time just kind of vertically integrated to everything. So first of all, let's start with the background. Give me your guys' background first so that we kind of understand where you both come from.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Yeah. So, as you just mentioned, I kind of have a background in performance, really. So the arts, but being an on-camera personality is something that sort of organically, grew in my career over the last several years. And so I would be in, major commercials and campaigns for, major brands as the on-camera personality. And then, that kind of worked out really well with what it turns out that Jon did. So
I am a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 14, and my journey has just been incredible. Different industries, amazing experiences. One of my deepest passions, aside from entrepreneurship, is marketing. So along the time where we linked up, I was leaning more into marketing at a marketing consulting firm. And so we got to talking and it sort of started from there.
Okay, so before we talk about that, I've got to ask you, Jon. So you mentioned 14 years old when you started being an entrepreneur. What was that first thing that you were doing when you were 14?
Yeah, so very first business. First, I'll say that I'm very fortunate to have been born into an entrepreneurial family. So,
okay,
I'm grateful for the circumstances I was born into, and so that entrepreneurial.
And who were the entrepreneurs? Mom, dad, both of them.
Yeah, my dad is a lifelong entrepreneur. He is mostly an inventor. He has one of those out of this world brilliant minds that can enter any industry and just come up with industry changing ideas to solve, big problems. So I was exposed to that, from a young age. And so I got the itch, the entrepreneurial itch, relatively young. And the first venture was in eBay. I started, so it was right when eBay was booming. And so it was just a very hot platform to be operating on. And it started with, I had my own sports memorabilia collection. So I started flipping sports memorabilia, finding other pieces out there on eBay and flipping it. And then word got out to my high school friends and their parents and their networks that I was the eBay kid. And so it naturally evolved into an eBay service. And so I just helped people sell their stuff on eBay. And that was my first entrepreneurial experience.
So I've got to ask, because you're one of the ones like me that started very early. Before that, though, did you ever do candy bar arbitrage with kids in elementary school or junior high, middle school?
Absolutely. Not only was it to that, it went to the extent, and I can't say that I'm proud of this, but it is part of my background, that I would charge my grandparents to enter my room. I would create an experience. They would visit from Canada, and I would create an experience of some sort in my bedroom. And there was
a value proposition.
There was a value proposition.
Yeah, sports collection, museum experience.
And I put up some sort of stanchion. And they would approach and they would play along, and they would hand me whatever the admission was, $1, $20, who knows what I was charging, adjusted for inflation. And so, yeah, I was always coming up with ways to, business ideas and make money and that sort of hustle.
So I probably won't be surprised, but there is a very high proportion of people that are founders and entrepreneurs that started young that have done this business of buying candy bars at the store and then selling to their friends or schoolmates for a lot more money. I did this when I was a kid too. And then that money was actually used for comic books, a lot of which I still own to this day. And so I was in the collectibles, but I wasn't as good as you about flipping and doing all of that. So super fascinating. So, okay.
I blew plenty of money on my own hobbies. So I think we're in the same boat.
Yeah. You're not supposed to sample your own supply is what I've been told, but
you learn that later
when
on
you're
the journey.
Everything.
When you're a kid and, comic books, it's like, come on, you got to do it. So, okay. So you were working, Jon, at a company, and how did the two of you guys know each other or meet, before starting all of this?
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible journey that we've been on. I'll let Ari sort of share how we came together and how it evolved.
In true, 2000s fashion, we met on a dating app. So we originally met more like on a personal level, of course. And so, it was a couple of years now into knowing each other personally that, as everyone does, we were just kind of talking about work and our clients and where we saw our careers maybe going. And at that point, that's when we started to notice that both of our clients were having similar needs, and questions. And, that's where we kind of started to have the whole, well, how could we help them solve that problem discussion? Yeah.
And we're both very entrepreneurial in spirit, to our core. So from the beginning of our relationship, we were naturally just talking business, talking entrepreneurship, talking the things that entrepreneurs talk about, what are the interesting problems out there and what are the experiences we've had.
What's being offered out there and what's not being offered out there.
Yeah. So it's just through, one of our friendly conversations that we had all day, every day, that we actually pinpointed a potential way that we could team up.
So in doing that, then, is that the kind of time where, Jon, you were like, okay, well, I'm going to quit then my job and start doing this? Or how did it actually start going at that point for you?
Yeah, so actually I was running my own marketing consulting shop.
Oh, okay. So you weren't working for somebody. You were already on your own at that point.
Yeah. So I had my own marketing consulting shop, and Ari had her successful on-camera spokesperson career going. And so we had the flexibility to, pivot to an opportunity. And so, it was just, as the conversation got deeper and more exciting and more clear, we decided to actually develop a focused venture around it.
And, at first we weren't even thinking about it as necessarily a company. It was like, I had a specific client who I had been working with, and she was a small business owner, this, really cool kind of like badass entrepreneur woman. And so she was very busy. She was running her whole, and I think she had maybe a couple of employees, and they were bringing in, some good revenue, but it was a startup. It was a small business. And so she calls me, she's like, Ari, we need to create these marketing videos. We want to do this campaign to put on social media, but we just do not have the time. We're just so overwhelmed. And, do you think that you could just kind of like film it yourself? And I'm like, yeah, I think I could probably do that. I've been on a bunch of sets. I've seen $1 million commercials made. I've seen, $30,000 commercials made. I've kind of seen a spectrum of how production works. And so then I think it was probably just after work chat, that I was like, yeah, so I think I'm going to be filming this video like at home for this client. He's like, oh, that's kind of cool and interesting. And And I was like, yeah, but how should I organize this? And he has this very, very analytical, organization, systematized brain. And I have the creative brain. So I was like, hey, actually, could you kind of help me think through like how I'm going to, organize the shoot and the files and the transfer and the, messaging on the marketing side. And so it really just was like a fun first, helping each other out on a project kind of a thing. And then when we delivered that video to the client, I mean, she was beyond thrilled. And she's like, can you make more of these? And we're like, yeah, we could probably figure that out.
And we just came up with a price point, as we're talking through, okay, so you're going to take on this project. Let's come up with a price point that we think, is a reasonable price point that is within her budget and appetite. And so, we really, like any entrepreneurial venture, you piece it together as best you can with the information you have. And if it works, it works. And, that first person, Ariana's client, was just blown away with it.
Yeah. So, okay. So you both have your own companies essentially, and then you start doing this project. At what point does it become like, okay, this needs to be its own company? Like, what client number was this at that you were like, okay, we can't keep doing this as like an ad hoc thing. This needs to be official.
Yeah, it's a great question. It actually happened pretty fast. We were fortunate that we clearly hit a need that was in the marketplace. And we just moved, fast to lean into it. So, I mean, it probably 2-3 projects in, we just saw that this is something that we could really run with. What's your...
Yeah, I remember that too. I was going to say maybe a small handful of clients or projects, that we completed before it was just, they were starting to refer us to other small business owners, because oftentimes business owners like to chat with other business owners and entrepreneurs, and they're all facing similar problems of limited bandwidth, limited resources, but huge need for more brand awareness, increased sales, increased revenue, which is what a great marketing video can bring to any small business. And so before we knew it, we were just kind of like, I guess this is a thing now. And like, there's clearly, a need for, Jon comes from a background of having entrepreneurs in his family. My family isn't necessarily entrepreneurial, but there was a real deep passion, I think, from both of us personally to help small business owners be able to reach a wider audience, and do it in a way that really represented who they are and what they offer. My mom, is big in the arts. Her whole professional background is in the arts, and utilizing that to help people and to do good in the world. And so it was just a very organic passion for us right away. And then it clearly was helping these clients right away. And so I think, within a matter of about 2 months, it was pretty clear to us that we wanted to put more attention on it.
So where did those, like the second, third, fourth clients come from? Were they referrals from that first one, or was it, okay, they were all referrals kind of across the board?
It was a combination of, we started from referral and our network. Like any good beginning sales push, you have your own built-in network, whether it's family, friends, colleagues.
Right.
So I remember that we did initial outreach, just announcing that we had this available. And we got a nice beginning influx of opportunity that came from that. So it was a combination of the two.
And actually, funny enough, in order to announce it, we were like, well, we could just maybe like send out an email to our contacts or post something on Facebook. And we were like, well, if we create marketing videos, let's make a video. And so we just made a very, very simple, very lean, a kind of video announcement. And we posted it on our Facebook, just our personal Facebooks. And we both have, decent networks, but they're not massive or anything. And that one kind of announcement probably carried us through our first entire year of business, because there were just so many people who reached out saying, this is what our small business needs.
Yeah. And I think that's a good pinpointing of, that got us our first year. And then it was entering second year where we had to think, okay, so how do we keep the momentum going? How do we grow beyond our network? Things like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's incredible that you were able to just do it on, very little kind of announcement, essentially. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, thinking back to it then, what did you guys think, or now in retrospect, what do you guys think is the biggest risk that you took in kind of doing this? And hopefully Ariana, you're not going to say swiping right on that dating app. That was not
that was
is it right? I don't really know. I'm too old to do the dating apps. my experience is way pre the dating. Is Right the good one? That's the matching one?
I actually don't know. I never did. I think that's on Tinder, and I was never on Tinder.
Right.
We met on one
know.
called OkCupid, and I think that was the only one that I ever was on.
Okay, so there was no right or left on that one. See, I know so little about this.
There's definitely swiping and clicking, so you got the right spirit.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so what was actually the biggest risk that y'all took?
Yeah, it's a good question.
That's a really good question. I think like any startup, there is so much time and energy investment. So while we're a service business, so there wasn't necessarily a large capital investment needed. There was a large human capital investment needed on our parts, learning about production. Myself being a first-time business owner, of course, I sort of had my own business going with being an on-camera personality, but this was being a business owner in a very different and new way for me personally. Jon was more familiar, so I had a lot to learn there. But just knowing that this was going to take a lot of time and energy, and when you're an entrepreneur, every month and week and day that goes by counts. Mm-hmm. You need to be bringing in revenue. It's not something where you clock in and you receive a paycheck every 2 weeks. Neither of us had a situation like that. So every day that we pour into creating something new is inherently a risk. But at the same time, you're inherently more mentally and emotionally invested, in making that risk work out well. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a risk, but it was, of course, really fun and really invigorating to be working on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It was time. The risk was time. Where do we focus our energy, our effort, our months and years, of our career into? So yeah, in our case, time.
Yeah. So in terms of like kind of pulling on that thread of human capital, did you guys pull from the employees that you already had in Jon's business? Because I'm assuming, Ariana, you don't have any employees for you being a spokesperson. It's basically just you because you don't need anybody else.
Yeah, sure. I didn't have any employees, but I did have a network of really talented freelancers. The Los Angeles is full of freelancers, contractors who work in production and work in creative. And so that was an immediate opportunity that I could just basically, send out a text message to a bunch of friends and say, hey, are you available to come shoot with us? And it was really a win-win. And in fact, it was, kind of an opportunity that I wouldn't have expected to be as fulfilling as it turned out to be. I was like, this is so cool. We're creating work and opportunity for creatives who a lot of us aren't from LA. We're from wherever else, in the country. Right. And we move here because we are passionate about creative endeavors and working in production and creating, cool, beautiful things into the world. And so, I was able to reach out to my contacts and just say, hey, do you want to come, work on this with us? And so it was just basically a bunch of, friends coming together to work on the projects for Vydeo. Yeah,
and that's been one of the most fulfilling things of the Vydeo journey over these 4 years is to find those very talented freelancers out there in the world and to bring them together into a fun, healthy, positive environment where we make exceptional, we turn out exceptional work. So. Yeah, the beginning we relied on the freelancers. I also at my consulting firm, I'm a deep believer in lean operation, and like many entrepreneurs learn the hard way. That came from earlier in my career running too heavily from an operational standpoint. So I finally evolved to a point to just deeply believe in lean operation, and that includes. Having a great team that can be contractors and freelancers. And so those are the people we have relied on since day one.
Okay. So that makes it a lot easier in terms of scaling up because you've got kind of this capacity that can grow and shrink as you need it to.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Okay. So I've got to ask, because everybody's probably thinking about this. You're engaged right now, assuming to be married at some point. How do you balance kind of that relationship with now running companies of your own and together now? And how do you like separate life so that from the minute you're waking up to the minute you're going to sleep, you're not just talking only about business stuff. Like, how do you guys deal with that?
It is a complex and great question.
Mm-hmm. This is something that I think we're both, fairly concerned with. I mean, we were concerned with, and that's, a fair place to start, where we had heard about that it can be really challenging having, family businesses or couples who work together. And at the point of starting the company, we were not yet engaged. We were dating, we were a couple. But, so that, speaking of risk, to your earlier question, that of course was inherently risky. And, I was chatting with my therapist about it, by the way, huge believer in like having coaches and therapy in your life, especially in entrepreneurship. And so you can kind of like talk through these big questions, right? So, we were chatting about it. I'm like, is this a crazy idea? Is this so wild and ridiculous? And she sent me an article that was really, really cool. And it totally changed my outlook on the idea of working with friends or family. And, what the article essentially said was that this whole concept of couples or families working in totally different professions and different industries for different companies is actually very new. This is a social norm that we understand to be kind of the only way to do it. But really up until just a few years ago, couples always worked together. They always worked within the same, quote, business. It was running the land, running the farm, working together to bring in food and resources for the family. And, while that was not necessarily a licensed corporation with the state, that was their business. And that you find your strengths and your roles and you support each other and you collaborate in order to, ultimately find success as a unit. And so when I read that, it just made a lot of sense to me. I shared it with Jon. I think it made a lot of sense to you as well. And I think that, starting with that as our foundation, that we're working together to create something successful and beautiful and that, everyone can enjoy and benefit from. It's just felt more like, I don't know, it feels more like a purpose than a job. And that has, I think, helped us not feel like it's this heavy weight that we're carrying around. Of course, there are challenges with business. And of course, we don't agree on absolutely everything or our methods to everything. But, I think that just sharing that common goal, respecting that we have different roles, and that's something that we clearly defined from the beginning is what our separate roles and areas of the business are. And while we do like to ask each other questions and ask for support, we respect that that's, we have different sides of the business, Jon being the business and marketing side, myself being the creative side. And that kind of, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think we work together better now 3 years in than we probably even did at the beginning. And it started well, but we just, I don't know, we got lucky. We work really well together.
Yeah, and I'll add that a big part of the foundation that we have is our best friendship. Yeah. Really, our relationship started from a friendship that turned into a best friendship. And that is the foundation that we have operated on ever since day one. So when you're operating on a foundation like that, you just have that deep-rooted mutual respect, that deep understanding, that rooting for the other person, wanting to go on a journey together. So when you have all those foundational elements in place, it makes the regular challenges that fly at you in business night and day. It's a night and day difference when you're tackling those things with that kind of foundation.
Yeah, I find everything you all said there, and Ariana, you mentioning that article fascinating, because I'm reflecting back to over 20 years ago when I was doing my first startup. One of my co-founders, his brother was kind of tangentially involved in the startup. And we actually had a VC investor that we'd pitched that told us that he was going to say no because they never invested in companies where there was a relationship amongst the executive team, right? Like a family relationship. And I'm fast forwarding today now, where one of the largest startups that's private, Stripe.com, it's founded by two brothers that are still at the head of that company, right? So a VC like that would have missed out on an opportunity to invest in a company like Stripe. So
yeah, sure. I mean, in general, we know that family-owned companies are notoriously difficult to operate and to turn into successes. So it is important, for people to generally understand that if you're going to have a family business, there are going to be unique challenges to that. But to not rule it out, because it really just comes down to the nuances of those individuals and the foundation they have. For instance, aside from having, that friendship, that respect, that sort of part of the foundation. Another big part that we've learned is when you're compliments. So we find, and I've seen over the years that a big type of conflict that comes when families working together is when you're overlapping in core areas, and that causes all sorts of friction and isn't sustainable. So that's something that we've had since the beginning. We just naturally have very complementary skill sets, and so they've very nicely meshed together. So that's been a big part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's actually a fascinating proposition there too, and I've never really thought about that, but I think you're exactly right. So let's talk about, okay, it's been a few years now. You've got the benefit now of a little bit of hindsight back to the 3 years when this all got started. What do you think in those early days, looking back now, what would you have done differently, and how do you think that would have positioned you differently now than the way that you did it then?
It's a really important question. The first thing that comes to mind, when I hear that is there's a night and day difference that I found when you take what we call a strategy first approach to business. And there's a lot less that surprises you along the journey and a lot less pivoting that is necessary when there is a strategy first approach. And so what I mean by that is to not just start executing, to not just start spinning your wheels, that you spot an opportunity, you get excited, and you just start moving in that direction. You fulfill that immediate need, and then it just snowballs into this, monster that you just weren't planning for, you didn't expect. That clearly can lead to all sorts of surprises and problems and things like that. So fundamentally, we are strategy first people. And what that means is that we spent a lot of energy and a lot of time in those early pre-launch. We spent months developing before we decided to turn this into a full venture. And so we were as clear as we could be in what we wanted this venture to be and what objectives it had, what we wanted it to evolve into.
We wanted to be serving.
Yeah. So, tell me how you feel about it, but I feel like we haven't been, of course, there have been learnings and definitely pivots, as more information comes in and as we find sweet spots, you lean into those and you lean out of certain things. But as far as fundamental things we would have changed from the beginning, I think we've had a pretty clear vision and strategy on what we wanted this thing to do. And I'm really happy that it's worked out to plan overall. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking about that, you guys both had your own separate things and now kind of this merge thing, which is really taking from pieces of both of those things. Does it come to a point where video is big enough where your own separate things now no longer makes sense as standalone and it just becomes one giant thing?
We're still asking that same question for ourselves. We both do still have clients, outside of video. I'm flying tomorrow to New Orleans, for an on-camera job that we are not producing. It's not a video project. It's just a project where I'll be on camera. And, it's really interesting, as a creative entrepreneur, I guess I'm speaking, for myself here, is that my on-camera work pays a lot more. There's so much less work that goes into me showing up on set. Of course, I love to prep and work with my clients and look over the script and, think through some of those elements. But, I kind of show up, we do the job, I leave, and I get paid. And that's awesome. And I do I love being on set. I love my clients. But there's something about, actually being in the creation process that we have with video where we write the scripts, we produce the videos. I get to supervise the post-production, the coming together of the story and the color and the audio and the elements to just create that X factor that resonates with people on on a human and an emotional level that is so incredibly fulfilling, but I get paid way less at the end of the day for all the hours that we put into this business. So
now that's in the immediate, right?
Sure,
so this is the nuance to entrepreneurship is that, Vydeo is a company, right? So, that's something that could potentially scale and that has assets and things like that. So those are the type, you have the immediate money-making opportunity, and then you have the long-term money-making opportunity. And how do those, sort of mesh?
Yeah.
I was going to ask that question because Ariana, your time, even though you're making a lot of money, you're limited, right? Like you could only have so many hours of the day.
Yeah,
whereas with Vydeo, you guys have the opportunity to scale that and grow that and have a lot more people working so that it's not necessarily you that has to do all the work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, it's a great example of the complex decision-making, that you just go through. And again, just being strategy first people, we're constantly having strategic conversations and analyzing and running numbers, and it's not just the numbers, it's the qualitative, side of it as well. So it's just a lot of factors go into this kind of calculation.
And one of Jon's strengths that, I find incredibly, valuable is that he can spreadsheet out anything. He can, quantify anything. So we have created these really fascinating kind of matrices, just in Excel that comes down to really just identifying what are the value points that we want to be paying attention to and how do we measure that value. So for us, of course, revenue is one type of value, but there are so many types of value, including personal and professional fulfillment for us as business owners, but also for our team. We have full-time people now, we have part-time, we have contractors, both locally and, some even around the world. And so how do we measure and track value for them in their professional growth, in their development, in their quality of life? And then, of course, on the client side, how are we measuring the value that they're receiving? How do we measure the experience that they're having with us and how the experience is for them and their team? And once we kind of do our best anyway to put that into a spreadsheet and really look at it in the black and white, it's been really motivating, I think, to continue focusing in on our mission of creating a sustainable business model that helps small businesses, which was really, I think, the founding vision for what Vydeo was. And only Vydeo can really serve that, because even with my on-camera clients, again, I really enjoy it. I'm very grateful for it. But, the types of clients that can afford a major television commercial aren't really small businesses. And they have huge budgets and huge marketing departments. And, knowing that we're actually helping to move the needle for our clients who don't have that kind of budget and those kind of resources is just, I don't know, I guess it makes your career much, much more purposeful and fulfilling.
Yeah. And that's the crux of the fulfillment we get out of Vydeo is from its strategic positioning. That we are delivering what we call highly effective marketing videos to mainly small businesses. We do, serve both small and medium businesses, but the sweet spot is to deliver, to marry those two things, highly effective marketing videos, which small businesses in particular have never had access to ever, to small businesses with small budgets. And that's our sweet spot. That's the thing that we've created here. Our unique positioning is that, and it's incredibly fulfilling to be able to deliver a quality that they just have never had access to that really moves the needle for their business. That's, imagine the feedback we get from that and how fulfilling, that is.
I love it. So let's wrap up on that, because that is really kind of the crux of everything that you guys are doing. If listeners want to find you, it's vydeo.media.com, right? Vydeo media.com. That's correct? Yep. That's the website?
So Vydeo Media, and the Y is right at the beginning, vydeomedia.com. Yeah.
There you go. Jon and Ariana, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. That's HISCOX.com. And if you have a story you want to hear on this podcast, please visit hiscox.com/share your story. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find me on Twitter at Sanjay, that's SANJAY, or on my website at sanjayparekh.com.